so many of us here with so many different backgrounds, perspectives, and experiences, but we are all of us united in a very simple goal. Let the people decide. As momentum continues to grow for the legalization of cannabis all around the country, and Kentucky remains in a shrinking minority of states with no legislative progress on an issue that the majority of Kentuckians have consistently supported. The question becomes not if we authorize cannabis use in Kentucky, but how do we do it? Moving forward with the legalization framework, whether medical or full adult use, is simply not an option without decriminalization measures being put in place before or at least the same time. For decades, the failed and irrational war on drugs has ensured that we have arrested, prosecuted, and jailed millions of Americans for low-level, nonviolent drug offenses. Americans who now have convictions on their records that are barriers to jobs, to capital, to access and opportunity in a newly created industry which is allowing people to profit from the very substance that has destroyed their lives. When we legalize cannabis in Kentucky, if we don't already have an automatic expungement process in place, if we don't first decriminalize low-level cannabis possession, we can't go back and fix it later. Land will already have been bought, retail space already leased, business licenses already approved, distribution contracts already signed, and bank loans already disbursed. Opportunities already lost for people who keep getting left further and further behind. In Kentucky, right now, we have the chance to do it right, not to act in half measures and in stutter steps, but boldly and fairly. We have the chance to move forward in a way that makes sure that Kentuckians struggling with pain, with trauma, with opioid addiction are able to access cannabis without fear of jail or a criminal record. In a way that makes sure Kentucky farmers and Kentucky businesses are first in line. That makes sure that those communities devastated by the war on drugs are no longer sidelined and treated as second-class citizens. I have sponsored legislation that would codify these important decriminalization measures into state law. But I also have a bill that is way simpler, a constitutional amendment that directly asks voters in Kentucky to decide whether they want to decriminalize cannabis possession up to an ounce and cultivation of up to 5 plants for adults 21 and over in our state. That's it. The bill is 2 pages long, and it asks one question. It's a way for lawmakers to hear directly and clearly from their voters. It's a way for voters to exercise their enormous power by voting on this ballot initiative, and it allows lawmakers to move past their personal opinions on cannabis use and simply let Kentuckians decide. In a representative democracy, we get the government that we vote for, pure and simple. We are all here because we care about that democracy, and we expect our government to work for us and on our behalf. The constitutional amendment I'm filing today simply allows voters to be directly involved in moving cannabis reform forward in our Commonwealth. I know that everyone here will contact their senators and representatives to let them know how they feel. This is not a partisan issue. And I also know that all of us here will work together and will work with anyone in Kentucky who wants to move our Commonwealth forward fairly for everyone. I am so proud of you all for being here this first day of session. I am proud of the work that our coalition has done and will keep doing to let the people decide. And I am grateful to each and every one of you for showing us that the representative democracy that we have in this country only works if we all work together. Thank you again for being here, and thank you for supporting common sense cannabis reform in Kentucky.
Thank you, Representative Barney. And yep, let's let the people decide. We can all get on board with this, and I think that we all will. Just not just have that opportunity. I would like to now introduce our second speaker, Kungu Jaguna from the ACLU of Kentucky. Is here to speak.
Good morning. My name is Kungu Jaguna, and I'm a policy strategist with the ACLU of Kentucky. No one should be in jail merely for using or possessing marijuana. Let me say that again. No one should be in jail simply for using or possessing marijuana. President Biden uttered these words back in October, and then he put words into action by granting a full and complete unconditional pardon for individuals with marijuana convictions on the federal level. We applaud his actions and his words. But as all of us know here, that had limited effect because most people who are affected by the criminalization of marijuana are at the state level and on state offenses. And that is why we are here today demanding our legislature create change on the state level. And why should we do that? One, it's a matter of racial equity. Nationally, people who look like me are 4 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession. And in Kentucky, that disparity gets a whole lot worse, nearly 10 times more likely, 9.4 to be exact. A law that targets specific groups and individuals and is unfairly applied to a specific group of people ought not be law anymore. Secondly, prosecution of these cases is a drain on our limited criminal legal system. In just the past 6 years, there have been over 56,000 convictions for possession of marijuana. Think about it. 56,000 convictions. Think of the time, energy, and resources expended from the officer who cites and/or arrests an individual to the judge, the prosecutor, the clerks. That is a lot of energy to secure a conviction for a crime that doesn't make us safe or improve public safety on any level. Why are we wasting our time and resources for people possessing marijuana? It doesn't make any sense. And lastly, why should we do this? Because we, the people, have said that's what we want. People should never forget, this rotunda belongs to us. This building is ours. The way a healthy democracy works is we tell them what we want, not vice versa. And this Commonwealth has spoken time and time again, regardless of region, political affiliation, age, or nationality. Kentuckians have all overwhelmingly said, now, today, is the time to change our old and outdated marijuana laws. And we are hoping that the legislature do that and let the people of this Commonwealth decide for themselves their future. Let the people decide. Let the people decide. Let the people decide. This is the year for reform.
Thank you so much. Let the people decide. For our next speaker, I would like to introduce Cherie Ray from the Law Enforcement Action Partnership. I will let Cherie tell you her story.
No pressure, my phone broke and I'm gonna put notes on it, so I'm gonna wing this. But my name is Cherie Ray, and I'm speaking on behalf of LEAP, which is the Law Enforcement Action Partnership. We are thousands of people in law enforcement that want policy change. We want the system change. We are judges. We are corrections officers. We are state officers. We are a big community, and we support this. I have a special story given my background. I actually come from Washington State, where I was a lieutenant with the Department of Corrections. And I did a program where I went undercover as an inmate in a county jail locally. And I was in shock when I went there to see half of the people that I was undercover, because I was an undercover inmate, they were real, were in there on cannabis charges. They lost their family. They lost everything they have on cannabis charges. But it's okay for them to get out and get on Suboxone and these other things. Where I'm from, cannabis has been legal for years. It cut our crime rate in half. We used cannabis, we taxed it, and used that for helping people get into detox treatment off of drugs that really could harm them. I was in shock. And I couldn't stand there. And after I did the program, I contacted the sheriff of the jail, and I said, I want to go back. I want to work there. We got to do something. And I went back, and I was shocked that we were releasing people who now have felony charges. Where are they going to go? What are they going to do? Their only choice is to do a line of crime because I'm going to get housing, all because of simple charge of cannabis. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. So I went and got my addiction counseling degree, and that's what I'm working when I feel towards. And I want to be an advocate for law enforcement because I've been in law enforcement 17 years. We are so short-handed, guys. We need our resources. We need our funding to be on real crime, not low-level crime. And I tell the story to everybody. Seriously, think about it. Alcohol is legal. How many vicious crimes can you think of, just off the top of your head, committed on alcohol? I can think of a million. How many crimes, vicious crimes, can you think of somebody just surely under the influence of cannabis? Not to be funny, but we always say, oh, it's a crime anybody ever heard when they tell their ex-husband or about a buffet. You know, it's crazy to me to think that we can legalize one thing and something with so much medicinal value. We have criminalized, and we have our jails so overcrowded. We have us officers so understaffed, and we're dealing with low-level crimes instead of our people and offenders we need to be focusing on. So I just ask that everybody think about this and really listen to us, because this is Law Enforcement Action Partnership Group. We are judges, we are FBI agents, CIA agents, correctional officers. We support this. We think it should be decriminalized. It is 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. We really, really appreciate your support and your being here. For our next speaker, I'd like to introduce the Executive Director for Kentucky Normal, Matthew Roger.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the welcome. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Matthew Blanchard, and I'm the Executive Director of the Kentucky State Chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, or Kentucky Normal. Since its founding in 1970, National has provided a voice in the public policy debate for those Americans who oppose cannabis prohibition and favor an end to the practice of arresting cannabis consumers. Kentucky Normal has been working towards cannabis policy reform in Kentucky since 2017. Today, I am here to talk to you about our stance on cannabis policy reform for Kentucky. There's debate about which type of cannabis policy that is most needed in our state. Some have the opinion that criminalization is the top priority, while others argue that the state should focus on medical cannabis for patients. And there are still those who hold the view that adult use in a regulated environment is all that's needed. All these issues are important, but for vastly different reasons. We've seen that there is a proven path to follow when introducing cannabis reform policies and legislation. Kentucky Normal believes that the top priorities for cannabis policy reform in the state should be decriminalization and medical cannabis, with adult use as a secondary goal. Therefore, as a consumer advocacy organization, we will focus all our efforts on these two important issues during the 2023 General Assembly. There are several reasons why it is necessary to pass decriminalization policies alongside a medical cannabis program. First, decriminalization policies can protect medical cannabis patients from being criminalized for using illegal treatment. In states where medical cannabis is legal, patients can still be at risk of arrest and prosecution if they possess or use cannabis outside the parameters of the medical cannabis program. Decriminalization policies can provide additional protection by reducing or eliminating criminal penalties for possession and use. Second, decriminalization policies can also reduce the burden on the criminal justice system. In states where medical cannabis is legal, law enforcement may still enforce possession and use laws for individuals using cannabis legally for medical purposes. Decriminalization policies can reduce the number of cannabis-related arrests, prosecutions, freeing up resources to focus on more serious crime. Fund decriminalization policies can increase public acceptance of medical cannabis programs by reducing the stigma. By reducing or eliminating criminal penalties for possession and use, these policies can shift the public perception of cannabis from a criminalized substance to a legitimate medical treatment. Although in our case here in the state, we have overwhelming support for that. It helps increase support. All right, Dr. Miller strongly urges that our Senate leadership move on a patient-centered medical cannabis program, as well as pass a results-driven decriminalization bill. We can't do this without you, our citizen activists. So please be sure to complete today's calls to action and let your legislators know where you stand on cannabis policy reform. They work for you. Remind them of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Let the people decide. That's what we're here to talk about today. That's the goal. For our next speaker, I'd like to introduce CJ Carter for the Minorities for Medical Marijuana. CJ is an advocate, an entrepreneur, and a patient.
Thank you. Hello, my fellow Kentuckians. Everybody doing all right today? My name is CJ Carter. I'm the Kentucky State Director for Minorities for Medical Marijuana. I work as a citizen lobbyist, ensuring that social economics is written into all current and future cannabis legislation. I'm here today because I have a story to tell. And that story begins right here between the state lines of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. You see, when stories are very powerful, storytelling helps build confidence. It helps in painting the picture, and it assists in developing the subconscious mind. The story I have today is a story of the plight of the Black man and the Black family, and also cannabis, marijuana, and cannabis. As I said, the story begins right here in the state lines of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, where it's a historical fact that the first hemp crop was in Boyle County on Clark Runs Creek in 1775. You see, 1775 was a time that was marred by slavery. It was a time that was marred by the trauma associated with being bullied by the crack of the whip. It was a trauma associated with being raped over and over and over again. The trauma associated with being lynched, with being castrated, with being set on fire to become the strange fruit hanging from the trees. It was a time where these acts of violence were actually celebrated and documented and even turned into postcards to be mailed across the land of the free and the home of the brave. Kentucky wasn't considered a plantation state, even though there were hundreds of thousands of slaves that called Kentucky home. 250,000 to be exact. Much like the slaves, hemp is not native to Kentucky, yet is one of the state's most valuable commodities, cultivated on the backs and by the hands of the Black man and the Black family. It was hemp, specifically hemp fiber, that turned Kentucky into an economic powerhouse. Cultivating hemp was a laborious process. It was dirty. It was very, very grueling. As I said, all done by the hands of the Black man and the Black family. So much so that the hemp crop was called the nigger crop here in the state of Kentucky. Now let me say that again. The hemp crop was referred to as the nigger crop here in the state of Kentucky. Kentucky, in its most prized possession, hemp supplied the entire South with hemp and hemp fiber that was used to make the bags for the pink cotton and the store for the sugar cane. Now, this is a story, and this storyline that was drafted to create the foundation of this country. The country was built upon this, and the story details the struggle of the Black man and his family, and a struggle that spans generations. The struggle finds its beginning with the Christian Black Codes of 1724, the antebellum era, the Fugitive Slave Act, the Dred Scott case, the formation of the Ku Klux Klan, Jim Crow laws, the ending of Reconstruction, Plessy versus Ferguson, the segregation bill, the bombings, the redlining, modern day police brutality, and incarceration violence. This is the story of our 300 plus year Holocaust, a Holocaust that continues today and continues with the failed war on drugs, which includes the war on cannabis. This war is housed within the legal and the justice system, where the casualties of war are Black men who look like me, Black men who fit the description. Within the legal and the justice system of this country and the state, there are clear racially skewed patterns of law enforcement. So much so that the ACLU states that in every state of this country, Black people are more likely to be arrested for simple marijuana possession. As my friend Condu just stated, we're 4 times more likely to be arrested nationally, 6 times more likely here in the state of Kentucky, 10 times more likely in the city of Louisville where I live. This begs the question, what's the cause? The cause of this is decades of inane cannabis laws, both nationally and on the state level, where there continues to be debilitating and systematic oppression, where the story continues of the Black man and the Black family. So we've diagnosed the problem. Now, what is the solution? First, we must address the unjust consequences of the war on drugs and the war on cannabis by developing social equity policies that create economic opportunities for Black entrepreneurs who want to operate within the legal marketplace. More specifically, the damage to individuals and communities caused by the discriminatory enforcement of prohibition must be repaired. We must create more equitable licensing outcomes through the entire application process. We must address the financial barriers to market entry, and we must invest tax revenue into the communities statewide that have been affected. Everything starts at the local and state level, which is where we're actively developing ways to remedy the disproportionate impact of cannabis prohibition. We're encouraging research and training and access for medical professionals. We're encouraging economic opportunities for individuals and small businesses. And we're also developing protections for both the cannabis and the hemp industry. In closing, the truth has no agenda, but at the same time, the truth hurts, which is the reason why it's so hard to handle. Even though this is the case, we should never run or hide from the truth. Because the truth of the matter is, the story that I've told today is common knowledge. It's a story that is hardly ever talked about. And it makes me wonder, why does our story continue to fall on deaf ears? To answer that question, on why it continues to fall on deaf ears, it just so happens that we're the prosecutor and the persecutor. We're seen as guilty simply because we're born in a system whose hate and disdain permeates every corner of this society. This is the life of the Black man and the Black family in America. This is my experience. When the police and the flashing lights are behind me, my life is literally in the hands of a badge that finds its origins in slave catching. I'm the father of 2 amazing young men. And the unfortunate thing that I've learned about life when it comes to my people, when it comes to my community, when it comes to us as a collective, with each passing generation, the history seems to repeat itself. So, where does it begin to change? When does this horror story end? It seems as if we'll never know. But until then, the marathon continues. Thank you.
I would like to introduce Rob Bickett, founder of Bickett CBD.
I'm really not speaking. Not what I have to say in front of all these guys. I do work with public defender's office. I'm a star. I've been with the state for 27 years. my brothers, close friends of ours were actually incarcerated in the 80s under corporate law and first. So they ended up receiving 20, 25 years at that time with no parole. I was going to Eastern at that time, going to geology, so kind of transferred me over to criminal justice system. Where, like I said, I've been with the state for 26 years. I contacted Normal back early on. They did great work. We appreciate all their work. And just, when you look at cannabis, that was in the late 80s. 20, 30 years later, if they would have got caught in California, they would have been innovators. They would have been, so it's just something that I think Kentucky's behind on the curve on, and we need to sit there and push ahead with cannabis laws and get things done for our state.
Yeah.
Thank you, Abby. I would next like to introduce the Kentucky hemp farmer by the name of Martin Smith.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to come talk to you about some of my favorite conversation pieces, which is Constitution and the Word of God. Two things I carry around with me every day. You will never find Martin Smith anywhere without these two things in his hands. This is the Constitution. There, I'm a little bit taller. There you go. Constitution of the United States of America, as well as the Constitution of this state of Kentucky, the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Why is these things so important to us? This tells you how you got here. This tells you what you can do when you get why you're here, right? And what you can do is, when things aren't exactly the way that you think they ought to be, this is injustice. When you describe it, that's the opposite of freedom. When you run into those opportunities as a free person, you realize that not everybody's an American. Are y'all? Raise your hand if you're an American. Yeah, not a Republican, not a Democrat, not a this, not a that. You are an American. This, because you are an American, says that you have constitutional protections and privileges and rights. I remember in 1988, I swore my oath to protect that Constitution. And I went overseas and I got to spend some really amazing times in self-reflection about what that actually means. And come back home and realize that I was a damaged person because of that experience. And I realized there's a lot of my brothers and shipmates, those who served with me, who were equally as damaged as I was. And I started thinking about, I grew up in the Ozark Mountains, and my daddy still today makes plant medicine out of everything you could think of in the woods. From mullein to rose hips, he's making some kind of medicine for our community. So I was a brown plant medicine my whole life. I ran across in 1998 a discovery in Israel that was the endocannabinoid system. And that system told me that God created a molecule in a cannabis plant that was going to be beneficial to me. And what that benefit was is to create homeostasis, means balance in the body. I was able to create that for me. And I'm thinking to myself, me and everybody else who's ever dealt with PTSD, me and everybody else who's ever dealt with chronic pain, me and everybody else, the list goes on and on and on. But what's the barriers? That's when I started my journey. Started my journey at the federal level, trying to get government procurement into incarcerated veterans who were dealing with PTSD as a way to have access to someone who's incarcerated, who's willing to try it, so that for his, same as me, for my brothers and sisters and those who suffered, would have access to the knowledge of what was been discovered in Israel with the endocannabinoid system in 1992. Each and every one of you are making cannabinoids. I started that journey thinking, how do we get there? What's the barriers? And the barriers were, you go to jail for it. You got possession of it, you go to jail for it. If you grow it, you go to jail for it. If you traffic it, you go to jail for it. That was my barrier. That's what, you can't procure something that people go to jail for. You can't procure something that people would maybe influence a drug cartel or something, bring money into that. So we had to start breaking down all kinds of barriers, and that's where my journey started. In 2002, Ron Paul, not Rand, but Ron's dad, they introduced a definition into the legislature at federal level for industrial hemp. Would legalize it at the federal level. Define it really. Hemp is just a word. You know that, right? Marijuana is just a word. You know that, right? Those are words that are defined in law, right? But I define it this way. God said he gave all the herbs for the healing of the nations. And because I am equally endowed, what's in that endowment? You ever asked yourself, what is in that equal endowment? Cannabis is in that endowment. God gave you cannabis. And he told me, I have trouble. I pastored for many years. Trust me, I tell you, I've been at the pulpit just like this, telling people, stay away from the devil's lettuce. And then when God spoke to me one day when I was asking about why he keeps changing my paradigm, and he said, why are you demonizing something I said was good? Didn't I tell you it was good in the beginning? I said, yeah. He said, then go find the good in it. And that's where I started my journey. I was in the pulpit, got out of the pulpit, and started, instead of writing sermons, I started writing legislation. And that legislation as a citizen advocate for my sovereignty, given to me by the Constitution to have access to an endowment that God created for me to heal me, Martin Smith, one nation. I'm one nation unto God. I have that right to have that healing because God gave it to me as a part of my constitutional endowment. That's an unarguable fact. And there's not a legislative body in the country that can argue your constitutional access to that endowment. With that, I want to empower you to do as I did. I didn't do anything different. I stopped writing sermons, started writing legislation, started talking to legislatures, figured out what their barriers were, and figured out how I could help them get past their barriers. Sometimes we think they're against us, but really they just don't know how to help us. I say, let's tell them how to help us. Patrick, thank you so much. Patrick, 2 years ago, said, Martin, I'm going to fight decriminalization. I'm going to fight for decriminalization. I'm going to fight for access. I'm going to fight for access. I'm going to fight for the medical protections for the patient, for the medical protections for the doctors, for the medical protections for the pharmacists, for the medical protections for the producer. That's what I'm going to do. And he said, I'm going to fight to decriminalize it. This is his effort. Would y'all give him a round of applause for his effort? I'm not going to take up too much more of your time, but I can tell you right now it's worth fighting for. That's what I learned when I went overseas and we got hit by a super tanker coming out of the Straits of Morocco, coming out of the Persian Gulf. And I was miles away from home sinking in the ship. You know what I realized? There's no greater power than unity. Those 360 men came together like I ain't never seen men come together. And we kept that ship alive. And I realized right then how important freedom is. God bless you and God bless the Commonwealth of Kentucky.
Thank you for your service. Dang, I'm having a baby. I appreciate it. My dad's shirt.
Thank you, Mark. All right, guys, we've got one more speaker today, and that is the man of the hour, the founder and director of the Kentucky Cannabis Freedom Coalition, Patrick Dunning.
I want to say thank you for everyone that is here to attend. I want to say thank you to Representative Carmen Kuba from the ACLU, Matthew Bratcher from Kentucky Normal, C.J. Carter from Minorities, Nate, right, Mark Smith. I've been doing this since 2014. I've lobbied my legislators until I've been blue in the face. They are not listening to their constituents at all, right? It's time to change the way we do things. It's time for an amendment to the Kentucky Constitution to allow us to vote on this, to be decriminalized. It's past time for people to be stopped being decriminalized for this. So with that said, if you're standing out in the audience, you see a QRC code, I want you to scan that QRC code, email your legislator, let them know that you want this plan decriminalized. Their number is 1-800-372-7181. You can go to legalizekentucky.org to view the bill and support the bill. Please share it. Thank you for everyone's time and efforts today. I truly appreciate every single one of y'all for coming out here and bearing the weather. Thank you. Y'all be safe going home.
Thank you all for watching. That was the Let the People Decide rally here in Frankfort, in the Capitol building in the Rotunda. Share this out. I am local, nonprofit, independent, so the only way you can help me is by sharing this out, commenting, liking, boosting the algorithm. I appreciate everybody. Until next time, you all.